Hello everyone. Today we are discussing organizational diagnosis. As you're aware, in the previous tutorials we have been discussing the concept of organizational development. So in the very first tutorial we understood what organizational development is all about, and we looked at how organizational development helps the organization build the capacity to achieve greater effectiveness and to adapt to changes. And then we discuss after organizational development, once we have decided, the client has decided, or the company has decided that they want to transform the company, they want to sort of upgrade or reset the systems that are in functioning right now, they have to call in something called organizational practitioner. And in order to do that, they can either hire an internal organizational practitioner or an external organizational practitioner. And both of them have their advantages and disadvantages. Both of them have got different set of skills and competencies, and that's something we have discussed in the previous tutorials. And then we discussed that when we are discussing the process of organizational development, there are 7 stages which we can discuss. So the very first stage that we had discussed was entering and contracting in the last tutorials, where I said that during the phase of entering we have to identify the issues or the problems faced by the company, and we also have to identify our client and the OD practitioner. In the case of contracting, we have to come up with mutual expectations. Where do we see the organization? So from point A to point B, from current functioning to the intended results or intended state, we have to see how can we improve the company or enhance the performance of the company. So we are focused on the building, improving and reinforcing the structure, strategy and the processes. So when we look at this contracting process, we see that there is mutual expectation involved, and also apart from mutual expectation, we want to decide about the time and resources. So both the parties, organizational development practitioner and the client, will decide how long it's going to take and how we can allocate the time to achieve the desired or intended objectives or goals. And eventually we discuss about the ground rules, that how much access do you want to give to the organizational development practitioner to come to the organization and exploit the resources and the data. So when we discuss the process of entering and contracting, we have to come up with some kind of proposal. As I said, it's a collaborative process, unlike the medical science, where the doctor has to go through a series of diagnosis, objective diagnosis, to diagnose the disease or the illness. Here, when we engage in the diagnostics process, all the stages are overlapping. They're sort of like overlapping, and unlike the medical science, here we have got both the parties deciding, or they're collaborating with each other to sort of diagnose the organization, to collect the data, to analyze the results, and to reach a conclusion. But it is primarily the job of the OD practitioner, if he's the one who is sort of like entering and contracting, he's entering a contract. OD practitioner is the one who has to diagnose the organization, and he should not allow anyone else to diagnose the organization, because when you diagnose the organization you reach different results. So as an OD practitioner, if I am diagnosing the organization, I might reach a different result compared with some other party, because they are looking into the areas, or they are exploiting, or they are interpreting the data that might not be relevant to the organizational performance and effectiveness. So you want to understand that different parties will reach different conclusions when it comes to organizational development, sort of like diagnosis. And diagnosis is very important. Without diagnosis, we cannot understand what's wrong with the organization. So the very first thing that happens in diagnosis process is that the client, they oppose the diagnosis process. They sort of like say that we don't want to go ahead with diagnosis process, because why? It is very time taking, it's time consuming, expensive, and it prevents them from sort of like reaping the benefits of their efforts. So there will always be resistance when the change effort comes in. And I've been using the analogy that if you are building your house and there's something broken in your house, and you want to diagnose your house where the things are wrong, and you call the contractor, and contractor says that I want to break the entire wall to see the root cause of the problem. So you will definitely be opposing the contractor why do you want to, sort of like break the entire wall? And you might say that this is the only problem, the water is leaking from the roof, just fix it, put cement or something. But again, as a good OD practitioner, you want to reach to the bottom, reach to the grassroots level issues and the problems of the organization. So when we discuss, once OD practitioner and clients are together, the OD practitioner will come up with some kind of proposal, a proposal to go ahead to transform the organization. So when you're transitioning from point A to point B, the very first thing that you have to be careful with is the goals of proposed efforts. So what are our goals? Where do you want to see our organization? It has to be clear, it has to be understandable, it has to be challenging. There should be an element of commitment, hard but not too hard, complex but not too complex. So you want to come up with some kind of proposed efforts, that how we are going to achieve the desired state or intended state of the organization. The second thing is recommend action plan. And this is where we want to understand that yes, we have to engage into some organizational change effort. And when we are discussing change effort, we can maybe utilize change process model like ATCAR model, in which we want to first give the awareness to the employees about the change that we are trying to introduce, create desire in them to sort of be motivated to achieve what we are looking at, give them the knowledge, required knowledge to achieve the desired state, give them the ability, give them training to make sure that they are able to achieve the desired or the intended results or outcome, and reinforce. Once you have achieved the intended goals, you have to reinforce the training or the change that you have introduced, because if you do not do that, change might end very soon and the changes that you have made might disappear. So you will rely in action plan after diagnosing, collecting the data, analyzing them, interpreting the data, using the feedback, that what kind of change process model you might be using. It might be John Cotter's model, it might be Kurt Lewin model. It's like an intervention, but that is basically dependent on the data. So data will tell you the practical solution, applicable solution, actionable solution rather. The specification of responsibilities, you also have to decide what is the role of the organization and what's the role of the OD practitioner. So you will make sure that both the parties define who is going to take care of what and who is going to do what. So that's another area where you have to be very careful when we discuss the elements of a proposal. So that's rather a crucial area, because at the end of the day, it could be a blame game, that the OD consultant is blaming the client for not being so responsive, and client sort of blaming the OD consultant for not being able to execute the change as he might have represented. So again, there is an ethical element. You should not misrepresent or misquote yourself, because if you engage in such thing, that's an unethical practice. A strategy for achieving the desired state. So when we discuss the strategy, it's about vision, mission, and values. You have to align your efforts with the strategy. So what strategy should we take? Data will tell you what areas do we have to hit, what areas do we have to intervene. So once you come to know the areas, then you will be coming up with the strategy. Do we need extra training and development? Do we need to cut down our workforce? Do we need to introduce a new system? Do we need to upgrade the skills? Do we need more staff? All these factors will be the part of the strategy. Eventually, we discuss the fees, terms and conditions. Both the parties will agree upon some kind of contract where they will discuss that yes, this is something I'm going to charge as an OD consultant, and the other party will agree upon that. And they will also set some conditions that if the desired state is not achieved, so you might not be getting the benefits that we have agreed upon. So that's the proposal. We have understood entering and contracting, where the proposal comes into play. But how do we go about the diagnosis? We want to understand that any system that deals with the external environment deals in an open system. So when we discuss the open system, you see any organization needs few inputs, and that's the open system model, which you can sort of modify as per your needs. The very first thing the organization needs is information. We need some kind of information or data or knowledge to run the organization, and that's a part of the input. So do we need energy? Energy could be human resource energy, it could be the energy from the say fossil fuel or the system, and of course we need humans, people. So once we put in the input into the organization, the transformation process takes place. Organization uses a technological and social component to transform the input or the raw material into a finished or semi-finished good or product. And we have output in the form of the goods, services, and ideas. Of course, there is a feedback for all of these stages where we see things can go wrong or things have gone wrong. So we want to understand that organization actually operates in an open system, and this is the model which shows us that what are the components that are usually used in the organization. So when we discuss technology, it transforms the input into output. Social component is more about the culture of the organization, organizational culture. So I've already discussed that organizational development is sort of an overlapping subject, and it overlaps with organizational behavior and organizational culture. Output, we have understood goods and services. Information, as you know that we live in the age of information technology, so we require a lot of data and information to process our input that is been. So we understand now, yes, we are in a position where we want to diagnose the organization, but the question is what level? Do we diagnose the organization at individual level or task level? Do we diagnose the organization at group level, or do we diagnose the company at an organizational level? So problem can persist in any of these levels, and as a good OD practitioner, you want to utilize the diagnostic model to come to the conclusion. So if you look at this organizational level diagnostic model, we see we have some input, and we have some design component, and we have some output. So output is about the organizational effectiveness and efficiency. We are trying to maximize our profit, we are trying to generate more revenue, we are trying to achieve greater financial performance, we are trying to reach employees or achieve employee satisfaction. That's one thing. That's the outcome that we are looking at through this model. So when we are diagnosing the organization, we see whether are we achieving all these things or not. And these things are dependent, of course, on the input. Organizations are very complex things. Are they living thing or non-living thing? It's an unending debate. So metaphorically speaking, if I compare an organization with the machine, organizations are pretty much like machines, isn't it? But they lack, if you talk about the word machine, there's a limitation to this metaphor. A machine does not have the human component, does it? It does not have emotions and feelings, unlike organizations. So if I was to use this metaphor, I might not be able to understand organization. So again, organizations have an element of human resource, which is the chief component or chief source of competitive advantage. So we want to come up with different kind of metaphor. If we talk about organism, organization can be like organisms, but again, it lacks a system then. Organization does not have any robotic parts like organizations have. So we want to see that there are different metaphors utilized by different social scientists to define organization. None of them fits. Why? Because every metaphor has got a limitation. There can be a metaphor, but might be a bad metaphor to explain organization. Because we have general environment, we have pastel, we have got political situation changing, environmental, socio-cultural, technological, ethical, legal, all these things are changing. Economical situations are changing, so all these things are changing in the general environment. So that is not in the control of the organization. So if you are diagnose the organization, you want to understand the general environment. If there's COVID-19, of course it's out of the ability or control of the organization to operate effectively and profitably. So that goes out of the question that organization can do something about it. Then comes the task environment, where we have got different stakeholders. We have got suppliers, we have got customers, we have got government, we have got new entrants, we have got competitors, we have got substitute. So you also want to understand where the organization is facing the threat from. So these two environments are very important to understand before we look inside the organization, where we look at the design component of the organization. Because as a good OD manager, you have to understand the effect of these things, the task environment and journal environment on the organization. If you ignore the effect of these things and you just focus on the design component of the organization, how the organization has been designed, and you want to investigate why we are not achieving the output that we are looking at, then you're making a huge mistake. It's a blunder. We cannot do that. So when we discuss the design component, the very first thing that we have got is what? Technology. In design component, the very first thing that we have to look at in organization, technology plays a crucial role for the success of the organization. It is at the core of the performance of the organization nowadays. So there could be something wrong with the technology if you're trying to evaluate or overhaul the problem at the organizational level. Maybe the technology is not so advanced, maybe it's not so efficient. So that's the very first thing. Then comes strategy, that there could be a component of a strategy. We might have a strategy that is a wrong strategy in place, and that's why we are unable to achieve or obtain the results that we are looking at. So I was going through the strategy of PIA, Pakistan International Airlines, and I was looking at their vision and mission. In the vision, they said that we want to become an international airline like Qantas and Emirates. Well, PIA cannot become an international airline unless until it becomes the regional airline. So first they have to become a regional airline, then they have to become an international airline. So there's something very wrong with the strategy of PIA. The vision is not too clear. So with such a strategy in place, you cannot achieve the results because you're thinking too far, given the fact that you don't have the resources at your disposal. Even if you have the resources, they might not have been utilized optimally and efficiently. Comes HR systems. HR systems play a huge role in the diagnosis of the organization, because why? When we are diagnosing the organization, we have to look at the how HR systems are working. Are they creating a work-life balance? Are they properly rewarding the employees? Is there proper compensation in place? It's all about the organizational justice, distributive justice, procedural justice, interactional justice, and informational justice. So you want to make sure in HR how the distribution is done of the resources, how the information has been distributed, and how the interaction takes place between the management, leadership, and the employees. And procedural justice, what procedures have been adopted to sort of like help the employees. Comes the structure, how the organization has been structured to achieve the intended results. That's another factor. Is there any problem with the structure? It is too vertical. Is there too many hierarchies in the organization that is making it inefficient? Do we need to cut down the workforce? And comes measurement systems, how the performance has been measured. That's again a very critical area where human resource management comes into play, and that makes this interesting subject so interesting that we want to understand that the performance appraisal, how the performance appraisal is done. So all these factors sort of make this organizational diagnostic model sort of like in this graphical representation. If you can see that this is how it can be evaluated. So if you were an OD practitioner and you were trying to sort of like diagnose the organization, you have to look into these areas, but you cannot ignore the two areas here. Of course, output and effectiveness. How do you define effectiveness? That's again a question. How the leadership sees effectiveness, then that could be a potential question as well. So if we move on from organizational design, I have written few things down here. We want to move on to the group design. So group diagnostic model. So if I just want to group level diagnostic model, if I have to come up with this one, group level diagnostic model, so I will be looking at different inputs here. So here the input will be organizational design. All these factors, structure, technology, measurement system, HR system, this is the organizational design That's the input here. And the output is of course team performance. We are looking at team performance. That's what we are looking at. So we are looking at team performance. That's what we are looking at. Okay. So when we discuss the group level diagnostic model, what are the group level diagnostic model component? The first thing is goal clarity. At group level, as we see, it could be a department, sales department, marketing department, or anything else. You have to make the goals clear. Clarity is power. The second thing, you have to look at the task structure, how the tasks have been designed, how these tasks have been performed. I mean, is there any conflict, role conflict? Are the role defined clearly? I mean, task structure is all about, like, if I'm doing my task today and I'm not there, is there anyone else as a backup to support me? I mean, is the task structure effective enough? If the personal assistant of the organization does not come in today and we don't have a backup, how someone is going to help? So if you talk about the admin department, is there task structure designed in a way to cover someone? So that's the second thing. Team functioning. Is there proper harmony among the team members? I mean, yeah, sometimes in jealousy, the functioning can be affected. Sometimes in competition, it can be affected. So team functioning is another factor when we discuss the group level diagnostic model. So as an OD practitioner, you'll be looking at, is the goal of this department clear? Is the goal of this specific group sort of like pronounced? If it is not, then there's a problem. Is the structure, task structure, properly defined, that I'll be having your back and you'll be supporting me? That's another thing. Team functioning is another factor where we want to see if the team function has been performed properly or not. Is everyone looking out for each other, or is there competition going on? Or I mean, does the team structure sort of like support the functioning, or does it create obstacles or impediments? So that's another factor. Group composition, of course, sometimes one group is too powerful and we have got the best players in the group. That can be a problem. Sometimes there's a balance in the group, that there are some weak people and there are some strong people. So we have to make a mix of the group, mix of the members in the group, so that we understand that yes, there's a proper equilibrium or balance in the group. There's no infighting going on. So that's another area. Group norms. What are the norms? I mean, apart from being ethical, are they compliant? I mean, are they following the rules and regulation? I mean, are they performing their tasks as it has been defined in the constitution of the company, or the way they have been trained? That could be another factor, because in Pakistan, majority of the organization are the victim of poor corporate governance, and it's been identified by Dr. Ishrat Hussain in his book Governing the Ungovernable, where he talks about the performance of WAPDA. He talks about the performance of PIA. At one point, PIA was training Singaporean airline and Emirates, but how come such an important or such a top class or world class airline went down to a level where we have got about $2.5 billion of debt on PIA, if I'm not mistaken? We have to double check on that, but the debt of PIA is more than the assets, at least doubled. So that's another thing. So when we discuss group level diagnostic model, we have to look into these areas. Yeah. Okay. And the last thing that we have got is individual level. So as an OD practitioner, if you've gone through the organizational level and group level, last thing you will be looking at what? Individual level diagnostic model. And here we have got input. And what is the input here? Of course, input is like individuals. Well, the input, as I've discussed, like is the organizational design, like organizational design, in which we have individuals with their skills, abilities, and knowledge. Yeah. And then we want to look at the effectiveness. Okay, so we want to look at the effectiveness of the individuals. Okay, so we want to see whether they are effective or not. But when we look at the effectiveness of the individual, when we are trying to investigate if there's any problem with the individual level, the first thing that we want to discuss whether individual have skill variety or not. So as an individual, if I am performing a task, I mean, do I have a set of skills to perform a task or not? I mean, if I give you a example of a factory, I might be a very good picker, bread picker in a factory, but I might lack the skills of packing the bread. And if I am not multitasking, it might prevent my ability to perform the task with effectiveness, and that will lead to poor performance. So the very first thing as an OD consultant that you want to identify is that is there skill variety? I mean, are the individuals equipped with the different set of skills or not? The second thing, task identity. Are they able to identify the task? So if I am a good employee and I'm a software development officer, I must know how to sort of like create the software. I must know how to test the software. I must know how to roll out the software. These are all the task identity. I should not be in isolation. So if I'm a good painter, I should be able to visualize the entire picture, how this product will be rolled out to the market. That's the task identity. Majority of the time people don't understand the overall picture. They only understand one aspect of the picture, and that prevents them from performing, and that's the task identity. The third thing is called autonomy. Autonomy, are they independent? Because this will give them self-determination, and self-determination theory says autonomy, competency, and relatedness. So if you want to work on a particular task, you must have competency to perform that task based on your skill sets, knowledge, abilities. You must be independent to perform that task. You must have some kind of relatedness, that you must have social circle around you where you feel that yes, you can perform, and you must also be able to relate with the task, whether you have performed this task before or not. That's the relatedness. If you have performed the task before, you'll be able to identify the task easily, and you'll be able to perform. So task significance, do you realize the significance of the task or not? Do you realize the significance, how important the task is? So if I'm a paramedic and I am sort of like um, dealing with a patient, I must realize the importance of giving her doses of the medicines. If it goes wrong, it can take someone's life, and that will lead to the better performance. Like, I need to be able to identify the task significance, and majority of the time people don't understand the task significance, how important the task is, and that can lead to bad performance. I mean, even a minor error can, bring havoc to the company. And there has been occasions where data has been leaked mistakenly. Someone has, mistakenly disclosed the prices of the share. All these things have happened in the past. Just take the case of Enron. They were going with a formula called mark to market, M&M. That was the formula they came up with, Enron, and they started showing their account receivable of next 20-30 years as profit. Well, certainly the accountant was unethical, but he did not realize the significance of the task. Had he realized this significance, the company would have not gone down. So we want to understand this thing. Last thing is the feedback. Feedback is another area where we understand the performance of the individuals, and the feedback about their performance will lead to better effectiveness. So do we give them the feedback or not to the individuals? That's another area that we want to look into. So that's the third diagnostic model. If you are an OD practitioner, you'll be working on organizational development diagnostic model, and then you'll be discussing the group level and the individual level. Now you want to understand how do you utilize it. It's totally up to you. If there's a question in the exam how to utilize these models, you can very well say that individual performance will be effective based on these factors, and this can help you in identifying whether the problem is at the micro level or at the group level or at the organizational level. So this was the end of today's tutorial. I'll see you with new lecture in the next video. Do like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much.